The moment a woman realizes you've stopped chasing her, something inside her shifts. And the strange part is, she often reacts stronger to your silence than she ever did to your attention. Listen carefully, because most men completely misunderstand this moment. When you like a woman, your instinct is to move closer. You text more, you check in more, you try harder to prove your value. You believe that consistency and effort will show her you're serious. And sometimes that works. But many times it creates a quiet psychological imbalance you never notice. Because attraction is not only built on presence, it is also built on uncertainty. When a woman grows used to your attention, your effort slowly becomes part of the background of her life. It stops feeling rare, it stops feeling valuable. Your kindness is no longer surprising, it's expected. And when something becomes expected, the emotional intensity fades. Now here is the moment everything changes. One day, without drama, without a big speech, your energy pulls back. Your messages become shorter. Your time becomes more focused on your own life. Your attention is no longer orbiting around her. This is the moment her psychology wakes up. At first, she doesn't panic. She notices it the way someone notices the room becoming slightly quieter. Something feels different, but she can't yet explain why, so she tests it. She sends a small message, maybe something casual, maybe a meme, a random thought, or a short, "Hey," not because she suddenly needs you, but because she wants to check if the dynamic is still the same. If you respond exactly the way you always did, fast, eager, available, her mind relaxes. The system is normal again, nothing has changed. But when your energy truly shifts, the response she receives is different. Maybe you take longer to reply. Maybe the conversation is calm, but shorter. Maybe you're polite, but no longer trying to impress her. And this is when the psychological gears begin turning. Because humans place the highest value on things that might disappear. Your attention used to be guaranteed. Now it feels uncertain. This creates curiosity. Her mind begins asking questions she never asked before. Why is he different lately? Did something happen? Is he talking to someone else? These questions are powerful because they move her attention toward you in a new way. Before, she assumed your interest. Now she begins investigating it. But there is another deeper layer happening here. When a woman senses a man withdrawing emotionally, it subtly challenges her sense of influence in the relationship dynamic. Not control in a manipulative sense, but influence in the emotional exchange. She starts replaying previous conversations in her mind. She notices moments she ignored your effort. She remembers times you showed interest that she didn't fully reciprocate. And suddenly, your value begins to rise. Not because you demanded it, but because your behavior changed. The most powerful signal in attraction is not words. It's emotional independence. When a woman sees that your life continues smoothly without constant validation from her, something inside her becomes more alert. Your attention now feels like a choice rather than a need, and choice is magnetic. But here's the part many men get wrong. They think losing interest means acting cold, rude, or distant. That is not the shift we're talking about. Coldness creates walls. What actually changes the dynamic is calm detachment. You're still respectful, still kind. But your emotional center is no longer leaning toward her approval. You're focused on your goals, your work, your growth, your peace. And when a woman notices that shift, she begins watching you differently. Her curiosity grows, her awareness grows, because the man who once seemed predictable suddenly isn't. And unpredictability awakens attention in ways effort never could. But curiosity is only the beginning, because when she slowly realizes that your interest might truly be fading, her reactions can become far more intense than most men expect. And the next change she goes through reveals something about female psychology that very few men are ever taught. Curiosity is the first reaction, but curiosity rarely stays calm for long. When a woman begins to feel that your interest is genuinely fading, something deeper starts to stir inside her. It's subtle at first, but powerful, because attention has emotional weight. For weeks or months, she may have felt your interest surrounding her, your messages, your compliments, your effort. Even if she didn't always return that energy, it still created a psychological comfort zone. Your attention became a form of emotional security. So when that attention begins to disappear, the mind naturally reacts the same way it reacts to any change in emotional stability. It begins searching for the reason. At this stage, many women start observing you more carefully than they ever did before. She notices your social media activity. She pays attention to how quickly you reply. She watches how you behave in conversation, not because she's suddenly obsessed, but because uncertainty activates awareness. Think about it this way. When someone always shows up at the same time every day, you stop noticing their presence. But the day they don't show up, suddenly your mind asks questions. Where did they go? That same psychological trigger begins activating here. And this is where the testing phase becomes stronger. She might start initiating conversations more often than she used to, sometimes casually, sometimes playfully, sometimes with questions that seem random. But those messages are rarely random. They're emotional probes. She's trying to measure whether the connection she once felt is still alive on your side. If your energy remains calm, balanced, and slightly detached, something fascinating begins to happen. Her emotional investment slowly increases, not because you demanded it, but because the balance of attention has shifted. Where she once felt chased, she now feels the possibility of losing something, and humans instinctively react to potential loss more strongly than they react to potential gain. This is a principle psychologists have observed for decades. People protect what they feel might slip away, so the woman who once replied slowly may begin replying faster. The woman who once ended conversations early may now keep them going longer. The woman who once seemed relaxed about your presence may now subtly try to reestablish connection. But these changes don't always appear as obvious affection. Sometimes they appear as something men misunderstand completely. Emotional friction. She might tease you more, challenge you, ask slightly provocative questions, not because she dislikes you, but because emotional intensity creates connection. When attraction feels uncertain, the mind sometimes tries to recreate emotional energy in any form, even playful tension. And there's another reaction that surprises many men: jealous curiosity. Once she senses your emotional independence, her mind may begin wondering if another woman has captured your attention. This thought can arrive quietly, but it carries emotional power because competition activates instinct. Now suddenly, your time, your attention, your presence feel more valuable than before. But here is the critical detail most men miss. These reactions only happen when your shift in interest is genuine. If your behavior feels like a performance, the mind eventually detects it. Authentic emotional changes create different energy than strategic games. When a man truly redirects his focus toward his life, his growth, and his purpose, the change in his behavior feels natural. His responses become relaxed, his tone becomes grounded, his need for validation disappears, and that emotional stability creates something extremely attractive: psychological mystery. The woman begins wondering about you in ways she never did when your attention was constantly predictable. And sometimes that curiosity grows into something much stronger. Because when she finally realizes you may no longer see her as the center of your attention, the emotional response can transform from curiosity into something far more intense: a quiet urgency, a desire to reconnect before the opportunity disappears. And this next reaction reveals one of the most misunderstood patterns in modern dating dynamics. Because when a woman feels the possibility of losing a man's interest, she sometimes begins moving toward him faster than she ever did when he was chasing her. When a woman realizes your attention may truly be fading, the emotional tone inside her often changes from curiosity to urgency. And this is where the psychology becomes fascinating. Because attraction rarely grows strongest when everything feels secure. It grows strongest when something meaningful feels uncertain. For a long time, she may have believed your interest was permanent. Not in an arrogant way, but in a comfortable way. Your presence felt stable, predictable, available. But when that certainty begins to disappear, a quiet internal alarm sometimes activates. Not panic, but awareness. She begins asking herself a new question. Did I underestimate him? This moment can trigger a completely different way of seeing you. Before, she may have viewed you as someone who liked her, someone kind, someone consistent, someone who was always there, but now she begins viewing you through a different lens, someone who might not stay. And when people realize something valuable might not stay in their life, they naturally begin evaluating it more seriously. She remembers conversations more clearly. She remembers moments you supported her. She remembers the calm confidence you carried when you weren't trying to impress her. Your qualities, which once blended quietly into the background, suddenly feel more visible. And that shift in perception changes behavior. This is when some women begin investing more effort than they previously showed. The messages become warmer, the curiosity becomes more direct. Sometimes she might ask about your life with genuine interest, not out of politeness, but because she wants to understand what has changed inside you. Other times, the reaction can be more subtle. She might start sharing more about herself, personal stories, thoughts, feelings she didn't open up about before. Because emotional vulnerability is one of the ways people rebuild connection. But there is another reaction that often surprises men. Increased playfulness. When attraction reawakens, people often return to the emotional energy that creates bonding, humor, teasing, light tension, shared jokes. It's the mind's way of recreating the spark that first built the connection. And here is something extremely important to understand. When a woman begins moving toward you again emotionally, it doesn't mean she suddenly changed overnight. It means your shift in energy created space for her natural curiosity and attraction to grow. You stopped chasing, and that space allowed her to move closer by choice. Choice is powerful in human psychology. When someone feels free rather than pressured, their interest becomes more genuine. But this stage requires emotional discipline from you. Many men make the mistake of instantly returning to their old behavior the moment they notice her attention increasing. The moment she texts more, they double their effort. The moment she becomes warmer, they become overly eager. And suddenly the dynamic resets back to where it was before. The mystery disappears. The emotional balance shifts again. This is why emotional self-control matters more than strategy. The strongest position a man can have is simple, a full life that does not depend on constant validation from someone else. When your focus stays grounded in your goals, your friendships, your growth, and your purpose, your energy remains naturally balanced. You're not ignoring her. You're not trying to manipulate the situation. You're simply living a life where your happiness is not dependent on her reactions. And that kind of emotional independence has a strange psychological effect. It makes your presence feel valuable. Because attention from someone who doesn't need to give it feels meaningful. And when a woman senses that your interest is something she must earn rather than something automatically given, the emotional dynamic becomes much deeper. Respect grows, curiosity grows, and sometimes attraction grows stronger than it ever was when you were trying to prove yourself. But there is one final reaction that reveals whether the connection between you truly has potential, or whether it was only sustained by your effort alone. And this last reaction tells you everything you need to know about how she truly sees you. There comes a point where the dynamic reveals the truth. When your interest fades and your energy shifts toward your own life, a woman eventually reaches a quiet decision inside herself. Does she move closer, or does she let the distance grow? And that choice tells you more than any words ever could. If her connection with you was built mostly on convenience, on the comfort of knowing you were always there, then the distance often continues. She might reply occasionally, she might remain friendly, but the emotional effort never increases. Not because you did something wrong, but because the relationship was never fueled by genuine attraction from her side. It was sustained mostly by your energy. And that realization, while painful for some men, is actually powerful information because it frees you from chasing a connection that was never truly balanced. But when the connection had real potential, the reaction looks very different. A woman who genuinely values you rarely lets meaningful connections disappear without trying to reconnect. She begins showing more presence in your life. Her conversations become more engaging. Her curiosity about you becomes real rather than casual. And perhaps the most important signal appears in her behavior: consistency. Not dramatic gestures, not sudden declarations, consistency. She checks in. She continues conversations. She remembers things you said. She shows emotional investment through small but steady actions. This is the moment many men finally understand something that changes how they approach relationships forever. Attraction is not built through constant pursuit. It is built through mutual energy. Two people choosing each other, not one person trying to convince the other. And when a woman realizes she might lose your attention, the way she reacts reveals how much she actually values your presence. Some move closer, some stay where they are, some slowly drift away, but every reaction carries information. The key is learning to observe it without losing your emotional center. A man who knows his worth doesn't panic when interest shifts. He doesn't beg for attention. He doesn't force connection. He simply continues building a life that naturally attracts people who want to be part of it. And ironically, that calm confidence is exactly what makes many women notice him more deeply. Because emotional stability is rare. A man who can walk away from unbalanced dynamics without anger, without bitterness, and without desperation shows something powerful: self-respect. And self-respect quietly shapes how others see you. So here's a question I want you to answer honestly. Have you ever noticed a woman suddenly showing more interest only after you stopped chasing her? What changed in her behavior? Write your experience in the comments. Your story might help another man understand something he's struggling with right now. And if this opened your eyes to the deeper psychology behind attraction, make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with a friend who needs to hear this message.